Welcome to Parenting for the Present. Today, we are diving into one of the most challenging topics for modern parents: pornography. We're honored to have Dr. Timothy Ateek, lead pastor at Watermark Church, here to guide us through understanding, prevention, and healing. Dr. Ateek, thank you so much for joining us today. We are so excited to have this conversation. As awkward as it may be, if you have little ears listening, this is not the one that we are going
Yeah,
to include them on.
that's right.
So
Yeah.
we are ready to get uncomfortable and just talk about all the things.
Well, I'm excited to be here with you guys and I'm excited to talk about this. This is something that has been a part of my story and a part of my ministry. So it's a joy to get to jump in and talk with you guys.
You've pastored thousands of families through this issue. Why is it such an important conversation for parents to be having today?
Yeah, so I think things that people know is that porn is obviously it's more accessible than ever before, but it's also more acceptable than ever before. It's also more intense and customizable than ever before. And because of that, the effects of pornography, they're just more harmful than at any point in history.
When you say customizable, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so think about if you think about millennials were known as digital natives. Gen Z is known as the internet in your pocket generation. Gen Alpha is the AI in your life generation. Like they're growing up in a generation where they can speak to their phone will speak back to them. And so when you take AI into the porn world, the porn industry and the sex tech industry, they are on the front, they're on the cutting edge of technology. And what that means is that pornography is no longer this scroll for as long as you need to scroll to find what you're looking for. It is you get exactly what you want when you want it.
Wow.
Customizable. Yeah.
You know, the whole AI thing is pretty interesting. I did a risk and take this week, and it was the first time that someone put an AI bot as a friend, as a person who they
Yeah.
could contact when they're feeling upset. And I've never
Yep.
seen that before. So I didn't even think about it in this
Yeah.
context of how that would play in to pornography consumption.
Yeah. Yep. We can talk about that more, but it's really interesting that through technology now, people can, with deep fake technology, people can combine anyone's face. If they have enough photos of any person, the person sitting next to them in class, the person at the gym, someone they're following on Instagram, if they have enough pictures, they can put it into software that will pair it with a porn star's body. So you can literally have pornography of anyone that you want.
That's invasive.
Well,
Yeah,
what's really, I'm sitting here, Timothy, listening to you. And by the way, guys, listeners, you all don't know this, but Timothy's my first cousin and has been one of my best friends for a long time. And you may be thinking, all right, well, that's interesting, Matthew. But what's more interesting is why does an elder at Watermark Church and the lead pastor on with us talking about pornography? Timothy, tell us how you became an expert in this area.
well, so part of my story is the summer before my freshman year in high school. I was in the Indianapolis airport, stumbled upon a magazine someone had left behind, picked it up without my dad knowing, carried it home, and that began. I didn't realize it at the time, but that one decision really opened the door to what would become a really what I would say is an intense battle with pornography for 7 years until the summer before my senior year in college. And it grew over time, especially when I got into college. And yet, as a follower of Jesus Christ, like Jesus is a rescuer, and through and God took me on a really major recovery journey to where now, pornography is something I've been free from for uh, for about 20 years. And then as I stepped into ministry, I gave my 30s to the college generation. And I would say that I had more conversations with guys and girls in college who were really wrestling with pornography. That was probably the topic I talked to them about most, more than any other topic that students wanted one-on-one counseling meetings. It was on this topic.
Wow.
And so because of that, I ended up doing a doctoral program. And I gave all of my doctoral work toward helping uh, Generation Z move from free porn to being porn free, is the way that I would say it.
What do you think is that typical age of first exposure? Because I'm thinking about like with my kids' ages, and they are accessible to the internet. And even though they may not be looking for it, we hear all the time these stories of, it just accidentally popped up or they, recommended this video or whatever it is. What is that typical age that you're seeing for that first exposure?
Yeah, statistics would say it's anywhere between the ages of 8 and 13.
Oh my God.
And I would
Right in your
I would
range.
skew younger, lean towards
Oh.
8, not towards 13.
And how are they getting exposed to it? Is it the older sibling? Is it I'm just recommended videos? Like for parents, how do we protect our kids from that early exposure? What do we do?
Well, a lot of it is it can be an older sibling, it can be, you know, a friend at school. Some kids have a phone and access to a phone very young in elementary school to where, they can be sitting at a birthday party or at the park. But also, what people don't understand is that pornography, the encounters of unintentional exposure, they're so high now. Our my first exposure, I was at a friend's house spending the night, got exposed that way. Now you don't have to go to a friend's house. It can be through a pop-up ad, it can be through, I mean, the amount of softcore pornography that's just on every streaming platform available is readily at kids' fingertips in the home. They might click on something that they don't even realize what they're clicking on. It can be social media. It could be looking over the shoulder of an older sibling on social media. There's so many different ways. There's not just one lever, but honestly, the porn industry does an incredible job of of I mean, we live in a pornified world where it has become so normalized and it's just accessible in so many different ways.
And you've said that before. We are living in a pornified culture. Can you talk a little bit more about what you mean by that and how that's different from maybe how we grew up and the difference between how the world our children are growing up in?
Mhm.
Yeah, when we say a pornified culture, it just means that pornography has become so normalized that it
Mhm.
is a part of the normal experience. So, when I was growing up, um, pornography was something that you had to get up the courage to go to Blockbuster to rent, or you had to discover uh, some dad's, Playboy subscription. Whereas now, I remember when things started changing. Like my wife and I, we love the show Friends, but I remember when pornography was the subject matter of an entire episode where Chandler and Joey discovered they had free porn. And when I talk about normalizing it, it's the butt of the joke. It's
Mhm.
not a negative thing. It's this is amazing. We've got free porn here. Was the thing. Now, if you look at all of the major streaming platforms, there is not, if you look at the TV or the shows that are the most popular shows, there is no most popular show that exists that doesn't have explicit sexual content in it. That type of softcore pornography, in order to see it when I was growing up, you either had to be awake at midnight and have access to an HBO premium subscription, or you had to go to the store to rent it. Whereas now, it's a part of the plot lines
Yeah.
of the most famous shows. that that everyone is streaming on every platform. So when I say it's just become it's normal. It's a
Hmm.
normal part of our rhythms. You can listen to pornographic content on Spotify. It's Instagram, TikTok, all have gateways to pornographic material. It's just in every part of our experience.
Yeah, it's terrifying. But you're right. There is that earlier exposure when it does become a normalized part of your daily life, that, constant consumption, you get desynthesized. And I used to work in a female sexual dysfunction lab at the University of Texas at Austin. And part of that was editing pornographic material. And we talked a lot about like these guys that would come in. One of the questions was, what is your porn consumption? And then we would shift, well, what do you find arousing? And a lot of times these guys would talk about how it started one way, but then that wasn't enough. So then they had to go to more extreme measures and more taboo. And then before they know it, they are existing in a subculture that they never thought that they would be a part of.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
so that desensitization, and it was just such a slow progression. They're like, I don't know how I ended up here, but like
Yep.
now I can't actually have sex with a woman because I need something that is so unrealistic. And so
Yep.
this whole AI thing too is kind of terrifying because it may not be achievable, but in the AI world, that is achievable. I'm like, ah.
Well, it's the porn industry and the sex tech industry, they feed off of novelty and intensity. So
Mhm.
the goal is for people to be convinced that sex in a fantasy world is far better than sex in the real world, because in the fantasy world you can have whoever you want whenever you want them. And what that does to people is they develop this internal conviction of I never have to have the same thing twice. And so what happens is something in you demands greater intensity and greater novelty. And so what
Mhm.
happens is what starts as a kid looking at naked still images turns into really deviant desires of looking at things that whether it's pornography involving animals or if you look at the highest search terms for Pornhub, which is one of the largest sites in the world, you've got such deviant search
Mhm.
topics, and it's just because people are craving new experiences.
You said Pornhub. In I believe it was last year, it was the first time we've seen the Texas legislature
Yep.
put in some sort of age verification
Hmm.
or an attempt to even protect children from accessing porn. Do
Yep.
you feel like that is enough, and is it working?
So, um, is it enough? Of course not. But I'm thankful for it in the sense that you know, anything that we can do to protect younger audiences, I think is worth it. But it's not up to I can only speak for me personally. I'm speaking now as a father and not as anything else. For me, it's not up to the government to raise my kids. It's up to me to parent my kids and to help them navigate a world where pornography is so prevalent. But I'm thankful that that was passed.
And the reason why I ask is because there was this time period where I had a parent that was really confused about why their child needed a VPN. I didn't even know what a VPN was. Like I'm tech savvy, I'm not that tech savvy. And after we really got to the bottom of it, what was happening is a kid would have a VPN, they would share it, and that's how they were accessing porn
Mm,
sites. And
yep.
it kind of unraveled. But I was like, oh my, you don't know what you don't know. I was like, I didn't even real something that is seemingly so innocent can actually
Yeah.
be a way to get around some of these protections. And that was alarming to me.
Well, think about this. This is where parents just have no clue. So how kids access porn. So people can naturally think, okay, of course, social media, you got TikTok, you got Instagram, but what about Google Maps? Have you ever thought about Google Maps where you can Google a strip club and then you can look at images that come out of a strip club of that would be pornographic in nature. So my point in bringing that up is not to put ideas in people's mind. It's more to say, like, parents, this is how, this is where we have to understand um, that parents, one of the things that I deal with is you either have parents who didn't struggle with pornography themselves growing up, and because they didn't struggle with it, they can't understand how their kid would struggle with it. They assume the best about their kids instead of assume the worst. And when I say assume the worst, it's not, I don't mean thinking poorly about your kid. I mean thinking realistically about the world that they live in. The other piece of it, though, is that parents just don't have any clue at how cutting edge the porn industry is to so that kids can access it in ways that parents just they can't fathom, and they don't understand it technologically. Like, I got outpaced by my kids years ago, you know? And so
Hmm.
parents just can't keep up, and the porn industry can capitalize on that.
So,
We
as a parent, how do you have those conversations? If you don't know what you don't know, how can you talk to your child about porn, and how early do you start that?
Yeah, so my I can only speak for me, but the way that I've approached things with my boys, especially because pornography was a part of my story, is I've just decided I want to talk to my kids about sex and pornography early and often. That's been the goal, early and often. If the age of first exposure is potentially 8, then each all of my boys have heard from me about pornography before the age of 8. And honestly, I want to be the subject matter expert in their eyes on sex and pornography. And so um, each of my boys, I've talked about it early, but I've also talked about it often. When I think about talking to my kids about sex, I don't want to have the talk. I want to have a bunch of talks because I want talking about sex, which is God's gift. Like, God made sex. God is pro sex. He's the one who thought it up. God gets a bad rap for sex as the one who's against it. No, we have it because he made it. But I want my kids, I want it so normalized in our home for us to have open dialogue that we don't have to build up to this, but okay, let me sit you down. We're going to have the talk right now. So we talk about it. I mean, I talked about it with my 8-year-old. It wasn't the first time, but we just talked about it last week. Had a conversation with my 16-year-old about it a couple nights ago. It's just ongoing conversation.
and that's totally in keeping with Matthew. Do you remember what
Birds
her
and the
name
Bees.
was?
Yeah.
It was
Mary Phil Ritton.
the new
Oh,
no, I was talking about the new adolescence with Christine Carter, and
yeah,
she
Christine
said
Carter.
she has a whole story about how her dad had the quote talk with her and how her mom was mortified later to figure out that it really wasn't a talk. And anyway, so that's her point is don't make it the talk, make it ongoing. But I think parents think, well, okay, and actually as a pediatrician, I tend to bring it up with the preteens. And so I like what you're saying that we need to start earlier, or at least you're encouraging. And you said you're only speaking for yourself, but we talk on parenting for the present a lot about proactive steps and then reactive steps. So if I'm a parent listening and I'm hearing about you called it a pornified world or culture, the normalization, the easy accessibility, but it's uncomfortable to talk about, right? And there's one thing that had always been suggested to me as a resource was that book called Good Pictures, Bad Pictures.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts about that as a kind of guide
Yeah.
for parents to get the conversation started?
Yeah. I think if you are a parent especially if pornography was never a part of your story, you might struggle with that, might feel like a big conversation. For me, I was more like, I'm totally going to talk about this with my kids. And so good pictures, bad pictures, what it does is it just creates a common language, and it opens the door to at least talk about it. But in the end, what the parent's responsibility is to create a home where kids can feel safe engaging with their parent about the topic of pornography. That's what I've worked really hard to do with my boys, is not just be the subject matter expert on it, but to be a safe person for us to dialogue about it and for them to talk to me.
But Timothy, a lot of parents, out of, reasons of their anxiety about it or fears about it, will say, but if you're talking about it a lot, isn't that kind of like putting it in their head? And aren't you potentially creating a problem? I mean, what would you respond to that? How would you respond to that?
Yeah, I think somebody is going to tell your kids about porn. Somebody is going to inform them. There isn't a scenario where it's not put in their mind. So I've made the choice as a parent to say, look, I'm going to be careful with how I communicate. So, for example, with my 8-year-old, here's what the conversation looked like. As I said, hey man, we've talked about sex. I talked about it from a very medical perspective with an 8-year-old of here's what happens and here's this. But I said, look, sex is something God created and it's a gift, but it's supposed to be experienced in private. And there's people who want to make it public. So uh, being naked, that's an okay thing, but it's meant to be in private. But there's some people through pictures or videos that want to make it public. And so that's how I communicate with my 8-year-old, whereas with my 14-year-old or 16-year-old, um, I am assuming the worst. And when I say assuming the worst, I'm assuming that they are going to school and that there are kids either talking about it, looking at it at school. That I've just made the choice I'm going to assume the worst. Now that doesn't mean I need to sit down and walk my son through all of the different things they could see to put it in their mind. But what I can do is prepare them what uh what to do when they do see it.
Okay, so we could probably spend some more time talking about the proactive steps, right? Like in terms of talking about family values and, like you said, creating a home where the kids feel safe, and the environment is that, hey, we're going to have these talks, and I'm here to answer questions, and we're trying to encourage. There would obviously be a different term, right, for media literacy, but helping kids think about what they see online. But let's say can we talk a little bit about the reactive? Okay, so either your kid has seen it and or is accessing porn. Um, what are some ways that parents can respond in terms of how they can not shame and kind of move from like trying to control the situation to connecting with their kids?
Yeah, so one thing that I've done with my boys is I've said, hey, look, and I would encourage every parent to just consider this. But what I've told my boys is I've said, hey, guys, if you ever see porn or if you're ever struggling with it, if you tell me, I promise you, you will never be in trouble. I just want to know so I can help you. That's what I want. I just want to help you. And they believe me now. Like I think I've proven that to them where, one of them got a random text, it was a spam text, clicked on the link without knowing, popped up, and what did he do? He came and told me. I'm like, hey dude, you're not in trouble. Thank you so much for telling me. So glad you told me. Um, if there's if your kid has seen porn once, then and they tell you about it, always celebrate honesty. Always celebrate it. If a kid comes to you and shares it, oh man, that is your moment as a parent to just elevate the value of honesty in your home. I'm so proud of you. If you catch them once, that is an amazing opportunity to cultivate their trust, to say, hey, look, I found this. You can even say, I'm surprised that I found this, but I'm so glad I did find it. Because one, I don't want you feeling like you've got to hide this or keep it secret, because you know what? I know from my own personal experience, hiding it can cause anxiety. I've felt lonely. I've felt the isolation of feeling like I have something that no one else knows about. And I just want you to know my goal is to help. Okay. If that's a one-time deal. Now, if you find that there is a kid in a place where they've become dependent upon it, that's where different people are going to have different levels of conviction. I will just say for me, like I feel a responsibility as their parent to step in and intervene. And so what I mean by that is that if I personally relapsed and had a porn issue, there are certain things that would need to happen in order for me to move towards freedom. So what I would want to do with a child who has become dependent upon it is a couple things. One, I would want to address the behavior. And when I say address the behavior, I would want to put my kid in a situation where they could succeed. They might view that as punishment, but I would try hard to communicate like, hey man, look, we're going to dumb down your phone. I'm not going to take your phone away because this isn't a punishment. Like my goal is to help you, but we are going to dumb it down, and our goal is to put you in a place just where it is harder for you to access that. But that's just managing behavior. Like ultimately, pornography is it's a heart issue. In the porn recovery space, people say porn isn't the problem, porn is the solution. So for example, Brene Brown in her book Daring Greatly, she talks about interviewing people who looked at pornography, and what they shared was, I look at pornography because I'm afraid of not being enough. Because in real life relationships, people fear rejection, or people feel lonely, they feel anxious, they feel depressed, they're bored, they're struggling with purpose, and so they're turning to pornography as a solution. So what I would want to do with my kid is just say, look, number one, let's work together to minimize access. Okay. I have to do that as a parent sometimes with myself. Too much screen time for me is not helpful. But then I also want to just address the heart and just say, hey, is there anything going on that I can help you with? Are you feeling anxious? Like, have you felt down? Do you feel alone? Is everything going on okay at school? Or is there any relationship tensions that we can talk to or talk about or think through? Like, I would want to address the behavior and address the heart. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Brene Brown also talks a lot about, obviously with porn, but in all areas, the difference between guilt and shame.
Yeah.
And I know there's so much shame that's tied into the secrecy and the addiction. Can you talk a little bit about what she's talking about, the difference between guilt and shame?
Yeah, I love how Brene Brown positioned it. Guilt is I did something bad. Shame is I am something bad. And shame is so powerful in our world. And it's so contrary to God. If you look at God created us to be in relationship with Him, to flourish with Him. And what happens is we can we become aware that something is broken in us, and there is something broken in every single one of us. And yet, at least my belief is that Jesus came, lived perfectly, died sacrificially, rose victoriously to restore a broken relationship with God. That when we have faith in Christ, what it does is it changes our identity, that we are viewed by God as his beloved children. We are made new, we're completely forgiven. So God takes all of our failures and replaces them with his forgiveness. And so the reason I even talk about that is that I, what shame does is it paralyzes people and it reduces their view of themselves. They operate out of low self-esteem because you live believing you're broken. And the key to battling shame, especially in pornography, is at least for me, it's helping my kids understand their true identity in Christ. Because we live in a world where people define themselves by what they do or don't do. But in Christ, we're not defined by what we do or don't do. We're defined by what he's done through his life, death, burial, and resurrection. And I understand I'm talking right now as a Christian, and people listening to this might not share the same beliefs. And I totally understand that. But a key to dealing with shame with someone who's wrestling with pornography is to help them understand what their true identity is so that they're not just operating out of the identity of failure.
And it's so important to do that work around shame because that will keep you stuck, especially in therapy, to
Yep.
do that shadow
Yes.
work, to really understand those parts of
Yep.
yourself. You often say that pornography is a counterfeit version of God's design for intimacy.
Yeah.
Can you unpack that a little bit for parents who may be new to that idea?
Yeah. So I said it earlier, but the porn industry's goal is to convince you that fantasy is better than reality. But if you look at it, God is the one, he invented sex. He is for it. He created it to be enjoyed. And at least in God's design, that physical intimacy would be combined also with a spiritual and emotional intimacy within a safe place of marriage so that there's no like concern of abandonment or rejection. That's kind of the idea that you can experience wholeness and oneness where there's physical intimacy combined with spiritual and emotional intimacy as well. Uh, God made sex to be experienced by two real people. And what pornography does is it's a connection with uh it it's it's counterfeit in the sense that think about it this way. You In order for someone to love you, there has to be the possibility that they could reject you. And love is someone choosing to love you, even knowing your imperfections. That's what love is. It's someone seeing you for who you are and loving you. So in the Garden of Eden, it says that Adam and Eve, they were naked and not ashamed. What does it mean that they were naked and not ashamed? It means that they were fully known. There was nothing to hide, and yet they loved each other. In a fantasy world, you're not truly loved. You're because that person doesn't know you, that they just love the manufactured version of you. It's a fantasy world where you're whoever you want to be in that fantasy world, but you're not the real you. And at the end of it, at the end of looking at pornography, where are you? You're alone, isolated with your phone. What you've connected with is a screen and an image instead of a real person.
I think that's an important part too, is to talk about the emotional intimacy. It's more than just this physical part. But I'm also thinking about, while we have a lot of conversations around sex in our house, with our children, not a lot. We've done like the good picture, bad picture thing. And I think the reason why we haven't progressed in that conversation is because of the emotional reaction I get from my 11-year-old son. Oh, mom, gross. Ew. Like, oh God, just like total, just, beat red. And then it's like, oh God,
Yeah.
you're right. No, I'm sorry that I push you.
Yeah.
What do you do in that moment when you have a kid that is like, oh my God, I'm not talking to you about this, mom. Oh my God. What do you do?
Yeah. I personally, when we talk about it, we laugh in our house. Like we still tell stories about how, one of my boys at a young age mispronounced the word for female anatomy, and it was just so funny that we still call back to it. And so there's times where I'm trying to even talk about sex, and like I can't get through it because I'm just laughing and kids are laughing, and I think that that's a good experience. Now
Yeah.
some people might say, like, oh mom, don't talk about that, and I would just say, um you're it's okay for you to not get through the full thing, where you don't have to sit them down and be like, nope, I got to get through all this. Like, just that's why not having the talk, but a lot of talks,
Yeah.
Mhm.
it's just so helpful, to where over time, the more you talk about it, the more normal it will become, and the less reaction they will have to the conversation. But don't stop having the conversation because of their reaction. That's
Mhm.
where I would encourage you just push through it, because in the end, that's a really good thing for your kids to hear from you about.
I think in my house, the pushing through it for me looks like this, where he's like, oh God, mom, ew, gross. And then he goes to escape and he's running. And my husband makes fun of this. And then all of a sudden I'm like, okay, but still there's like a and it's just like so fast. And I'm just waiting for the door to shut. And then it's just like, that's the mute button where I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
I think he heard it. Okay, good. Progress.
You can also do like, hey, look, for 2 minutes, we're going to have a super awkward conversation. So 2 minutes, we're going to set a timer. And at the end of 2 minutes, I'm going to stop talking.
Hey, I am
And
not above bribing my kid to sit through this
totally,
conversation.
yeah, it's
I will pay
okay,
you. Sit
because
down.
at some point, it's at least they will know, hey, my mom knows what she's talking about. She's the subject matter expert on this.
And you touched a little bit on that earlier about being that lighthouse parent. We want our kids to come to us instead of going to their peers for information. I can think back to when I was in this research lab. Part of what we did was talk about sex education to high schools. And I would ask, what are some things that you think are facts or myths? And they would say things like, well, if you eat a yellow Skittle, it's birth control. Or if you have sex in water, it'll swim out and you can't get pregnant. And I think what that really highlighted is that you don't want your kids going to their peers for
Yeah.
information when you want to be the expert and the source of that information.
Yeah.
But it starts early when you position yourself in that position. And that's important.
Well, and the reality is that pornography is the stand-in sex education for so many people. And so what you have is you've got young teens who get into a relationship, and then they try and choke the other person or hit the other person. This is a reality, and it's because uh sex their first exposure to sex was through pornography. It wasn't through their parent talking to them about it. And so their understanding of sex is actually a pornified version of sex.
And it seems really, if we're able to talk about really uncomfortable subjects with our kids, and they in turn are going to model that back with us, because I think we're not talking about it. Because most parents, if they're honest, will say, I do not want to talk about sex to my kids. That's super weird. But I think we have to change that narrative to say that's super critical. And it's like having conversations about, alcohol or drugs or relationship abuse or, birth control. I think another thing a lot of parents really struggle with is talking about birth control, preventing unwanted pregnancies. So it's all part of the same conversation.
Mhm. Yep. Yeah. For me, it's just been helpful to consistently remember someone will talk to them about it.
Absolutely.
There's no scenario where they don't learn about it.
Yeah, it's that concept of we don't want to parent out of panic, right? We want to
Yeah.
parent out of peace. And while we can't protect our kids from every image or any exposure, but we can point them to every inch of grace too, and just
Yeah.
creating that flexible relationship. And I think that's an important part.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, Timothy, as we kind of close together, any parting words, any thoughts you want to share that we didn't cover? I think people are really going to benefit from, your wisdom that you've kind of shared with us, but I'm curious if there's any other thoughts you have.
Yeah, there's two ways to go with caring for your kids and pornography. One is to like try and control everything. And then the other is to just throw in the towel and be like, well, can't do anything about it. And I would just say, like, you have to operate off your own convictions, but I'll just tell you for me, like, here's my goal. I want to parent my boys now in a way that we will be best friends one day, but not today. Like, today, I'm still more parent than friend. And I think kids want boundaries. I think boundaries actually communicates love to children. I think about like 20 years from now, what what will my kids say about how I operated regarding their phone or pornography? Like, I don't want to be the cool parent now, and then 20 years from now, my kids are actually saying, you know what? What were my parents thinking? Like, why did they give me a phone at such and such age and let me hide out in my room for hours and they had no boundaries, no restrictions? I don't want to be the cool dad now. And like the reason for, their whatever 20 years from now, where, because I deal with it now, it's at a church where I see these marriages just imploding because a guy's porn issue has finally surfaced, and it started back when they were in their teens. So I'm trying to just navigate this balance of like, I'm still a parent. I want to create boundaries. And I want the kids to know why there's those boundaries. It is truly out of love, not out of control. And but my greatest responsibility isn't to control my kids, is to cultivate my kids, is to cultivate their minds, and it's to cultivate their hearts.
Timothy,
Amen.
where can our listeners find you or listen to more of your wisdom, your sermons? Where can we find you?
Yeah, so you can go to watermark.org. The church I lead is called Watermark Community Church, watermark.org. There's a bunch of sermons on there that I've given on Sundays. Um, and we have different ministries there. So for example, if there are parents who have a kid who's really struggling with pornography, we have a ministry called Regeneration for Students. It's like a recovery program, but don't think negative thing. It's more like it's just helping kids process through any hurts that they have, any things that they're trying to break. So we've got different resources that could be helpful for parents and for kids. And watermark.org is a great place to find those.
I think your top listener is my mom, Timothy. So if anybody gets
Yeah.
the downloads on Watermark in front of, my mom, I'll be surprised.
Well,
This
thank
was
you
so good.
so
So
much
fun.
for
Yeah.
joining us today. This has been really informative. I'm really excited for all of our listeners to have these hard conversations, and we value your expertise in this area. So to our listeners, thank you, and keep parenting for the present.